Marcus had always believed that being a good person meant putting everyone else first. It started with small things. The elderly woman who lived 3 houses down struggled to carry her groceries up the narrow steps to her porch. Marcus began walking them inside for her every Saturday. Across the street, his neighbor's car often refused to start on cold mornings. Marcus would come outside with jumper cables before leaving for work. At his job, he had quietly become the person everyone depended on. If someone fell behind on a project, Marcus stayed late to help finish it. If someone needed a shift covered, Marcus rearranged his schedule. If someone needed advice, Marcus listened patiently. People appreciated him, or at least that's what he believed. "You're such a good guy," they would say. "You always show up." Marcus smiled every time he heard that. It felt good to be needed. Over time, helping people stopped being something Marcus did occasionally. It became who he was. His time was rarely his own. His evenings belonged to other people's problems. His weekends disappeared into favors and responsibilities that were never truly his. There were things Marcus once wanted for himself. He had written them down years ago in a small notebook. Ideas for a small business, places he hoped to travel, skills he wanted to learn. But those pages slowly gathered dust in a drawer because someone always needed something first. Marcus told himself he would focus on his own life eventually, just not today. Then one winter, Marcus got sick. It began with a headache and a sore throat. Within a day, he could barely stand without feeling dizzy. The small apartment he lived in felt colder than usual. For the first time in years, Marcus needed help. He sent a message to a coworker. He had helped finish several reports the month before. No reply. He called a friend whose shift he had covered many times. "Hey, man," the friend said quickly, "I'm kind of busy today. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow came and went. Marcus tried the neighbor whose car he had fixed countless mornings. The message was read, but no answer followed. For 3 days, Marcus stayed in that apartment alone. The groceries in his kitchen ran low. The medicine he had bought the first day ran out. The silence grew heavier than the illness itself. Lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, Marcus felt something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. He had spent years showing up for everyone else, but when he needed someone to show up for him, no one came. When Marcus finally recovered, he opened the drawer beside his bed and pulled out the old notebook. Inside were the plans he had written years earlier. A business idea sketched across several pages. A list of places he once hoped to visit. Notes about learning new skills and building something of his own. Most of the pages were untouched. Marcus closed the notebook slowly. For the first time in years, he asked himself a question he had been avoiding. When does my life begin? A few days later, Marcus walked through the park near his apartment. It was quiet there in the late afternoon. Bare trees stretched across the winter sky. A few people passed by slowly, lost in their own thoughts. Marcus sat down on a wooden bench near the walking path. He watched the people passing, couples talking quietly, a man jogging with headphones, an older gentleman feeding crumbs to a small group of birds. The man sat on the bench beside Marcus without saying anything. For several minutes, they simply watched the park together. Eventually, the older man spoke. You look like someone carrying too much weight. Marcus glanced at him. Do I? The man smiled faintly. People who are at peace rarely stare at the ground for that long. Marcus hesitated, then laughed softly. I guess I've just been thinking. About what? Marcus looked out at the empty walking path. About how much time I've spent helping everyone else. The older man nodded slowly. And what did you discover? Marcus exhaled. That when I needed help, no one was there. The older man watched the birds scatter across the grass. Many people learn that lesson eventually, he said. Marcus frowned slightly. I thought being there for people meant they would be there for me. The man shook his head gently. Kindness does not guarantee loyalty. Silence settled between them for a moment. Marcus finally asked, So what should I do? Stop helping people? The man smiled. No, helping people is not the problem. He pointed toward a tall tree standing near the center of the park. Look at that tree. Marcus followed his gaze. What about it? The older man leaned back slightly on the bench. That tree provides shade to everyone who walks past it. Marcus nodded. Yes, but imagine if the tree gave away all its roots as well. Marcus looked confused. It would fall. Exactly. The older man turned toward him. Many people give away their time, their energy, their peace, and their ambitions until nothing is left to hold them up. Marcus sat quietly. The man continued. Helping others is admirable, but abandoning yourself is not kindness. It is slow self-neglect. Marcus stared at the ground. That sounds like my life. The older man chuckled softly. Most people who end up on that bench eventually say the same thing. Marcus looked up. What bench? The man tapped the wooden seat beneath them. This one, Marcus laughed. You talk like people come here often. They do. Why? The older man shrugged lightly. Because sometimes people need to stop long enough to see their own lives clearly. Marcus sat quietly for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been lingering in his mind. How do I change? The older man stood slowly, brushing a bit of dust from his coat. Start by protecting your time. Marcus looked up. That's it? The man nodded. Time is the one thing people are most comfortable taking from others. He began walking down the path, then stopped briefly. One more thing, he said without turning around. Marcus waited. If you want your life to grow, stop planting your energy in other people's gardens. With that, the man continued down the path and disappeared between the trees. Marcus remained on the bench long after the park had grown quiet. Over the next few weeks, he began making small changes. When people asked for favors that would cost him his own time or plans, Marcus paused before answering. Sometimes he still helped, but sometimes he said something he had rarely said before. No. At first, people were surprised. A few were confused. Some were disappointed. But something else happened as well. Marcus finally had time. Time to revisit the ideas in his notebook. Time to work on the plans he had once abandoned. Time to build something that belonged to him. Months later, Marcus returned to the same park. He sat on the same bench. The winter had passed, and the trees were filled with green leaves again. People walked through the park just as they always had. But Marcus felt different because he had finally learned something that many people spend their entire lives misunderstanding. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is necessary, because a person who constantly abandons their own life eventually has nothing left to give. And the strongest lives are built by people who understand one quiet truth. You cannot give your best to the world until you stop forgetting yourself. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe to Old Wisdom for more quiet lessons about life, choices, and the paths we take.